Thank you so much. So I'm here again to talk about the food revolution going on in Sweden right now and how perhaps the same thing could happen everywhere. But I want to start with a brief update about the next generation of low carb. Because last year on the cruise, my girlfriend was with me and she was eating a strict low carb diet while pregnant. And this is our daughter, Clara. So she's 7 months old now. She doesn't eat any grains, no refined sugar, and she's really healthy. Plus, yeah, she's slightly above the median, you could say. Yeah. We were given a special low-carb cruise T-shirt last year, and here it is. So, thank you so much. Okay, moving back to the food revolution. I'm going to talk about 4 things today. The first is why we desperately need a revolution. The second thing is that it's already starting in Sweden. And the third, the science behind it. And finally, how we could make it happen everywhere. So, I usually start with David. Because this is the famous statue, of course, by Michelangelo. Because a lot of people see this as a sort of ideal male body, like a young Greek god. But this is when David was living in Italy. Yeah, then he moved to the United States. And he started eating really healthy food, according to my plate. And this is what happened. So, not a pretty sight. But of course, David is not alone with this problem, because obesity has become a huge problem in the entire Western world, including, quite recently, including for many of the patients who come to see me. And the question is, why is this? And what can we do about it? I'm trying to do some small part in this. So I started a blog in Sweden 4 years ago. And this has been an interesting journey because I knew nothing about blogging when I started. But still, there were about 500 visits every day just a month later. So obviously, this is a topic that a lot of people find interesting, diet and health. A year later, 5,000 people were showing up each day. And this year, it's up to 35,000. So, something big is happening in Sweden right now. And to understand why, we have to briefly go back in time a few million years. So this is a basic view of human evolution. And the only point I have with this is that it took millions of years. It takes a long time to change our bodies and change our genes. But the modern obesity epidemic, as you know, it didn't take millions of years. It took, well, most of it anyway, most of the epidemic, it took only 28 years. That's all. And how could this even be possible? Obviously, something must have changed in the environment. This could not just be a genetic problem with everybody mutating at the same time, right? No. So something must have happened. And what happened back in 1984? Well, one thing that I find interesting is that a big campaign was launched to teach the American people to fear fat. Real food like eggs and bacon, meat, butter, everything with fat in it. And the idea was, as you know, that fat raises the cholesterol, so therefore it was supposed to give us heart disease. A largely unproven theory back then. But we did this anyway, sort of like an experiment. And I'm preaching to the choir here, but you know the problems, right? If you eat less fat, you will have to eat more carbohydrates if you don't want to be hungry all the time. And if you eat too much bad carbohydrates, your insulin will go up, and this can lead to obesity because it's the fat-storing hormone in our bodies. So let's see what did happen. This is the official obesity statistics from the US in 1985, the year after this campaign was launched. How many people have seen these statistics? About half of you, maybe a third. Pretty shocking, actually. And if you take a look at this map, you can see that the white states, we don't even have any accurate statistics from this year because obesity wasn't a huge problem back then. But in the blue states, there are around 10% obese Americans. Okay, let's move ahead 2 years at a time. 1987, 89, 91, 93, and 95. You see something's happening rapidly. And these dark blue states that weren't around at all just 10 years before are now covering half the nation. And that is over 15% obesity. So that's a huge increase in only 10 years. 97, 99, 2001, 03, 05, 07, and 2010. So you see America changing color all over, and the blue state, the yellow states, that's over 20% obesity. So that's double what it was just a couple of decades earlier. And the orange states, covering most of the nation, that's over 25% obesity, and the red states over 30. So the obesity is spreading like a cancer across the country, and obese Americans have become common in just a couple of decades. Unfortunately, this happens to kids too. So 3 times more obesity in less than 1 generation. This has got to be something that's changed in the environment. And this started right after we became afraid of fat and started eating more bad carbohydrates instead. And it gets even worse because obesity, it isn't just a cosmetic problem. It's strongly associated, as you know, with all kinds of Western diseases, heart disease, diabetes, even cancer. And here's where it gets really scary because it might be that the same thing that make people tend to gain weight could also be increasing all our risk for these other diseases. It's really scary when you consider that the obesity epidemic isn't stopping. It's just there are new records every year. And you might wonder where it's going to end. Well, some researchers have calculated that if the trend lines continue, if nothing happens, in the year 2048, every single American is going to be either obese or overweight. Nobody is going to be normal anymore. And obviously that's just crazy. So something has got to be done to change this. And perhaps we can find some ideas in the place where I come from, which is a small country in Northern Europe called Sweden. And there are 9 million Swedes, of which about 20 are here today, I think. Do we have a show of hands? We're all in this section. Okay. Us Swedes, we're known for 3 different things, mainly. The pop group ABBA, of course. Our gift to the world. Also, the Nobel Prize. And more recently, fad diets. Yeah. This is the title of an article published in a prestigious medical journal a couple of years ago. Fad diets in Sweden, of all places. I mean, they got the Nobel Prize. How can they fall for fad diets? What they were worried about was a diet that was already back then quite popular, called LCHF, standing for low carb, high fat. And this is a low carb diet similar to the Atkins diet, of course. It's supposed to avoid sugar, avoid starch, bread, pasta, such things, and instead eat all you like from other kinds of real food, such as meat and fish, plenty of vegetables, and even butter and high-fat cheese in your cooking if you like. Actually, these pictures are from a cookbook by a man called Skaldeman, who's sitting here. We have, it's a very beautiful pictures. Do you have any plan to translate it to English?
Yes, please.
Not yet.
Not yet. Maybe you can inquire at the, if everybody writes to your publisher, perhaps. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, some people still believe that this real food here is really dangerous to eat, really bad for you. Why? Because there's no percentage limit on how much saturated fat you're allowed to eat. It's all up to you, right? And that's supposed to be dangerous. Well, is it? We're going to get to that soon. After some Swedish statistics, this is something that I find interesting. This is the sales of butter in Sweden from 1985 up until 2008. And you can see it's dropped to less than half during the period where we were also scared of fat because it was supposed to give you heart disease. But it was also claimed that if you got rid of this calorie-rich butter and ate your bread without it, then you were supposed to lose weight, right? Because it's fewer calories. But that's not quite what happened in America. And if you add the statistics for overweight and obesity in Sweden, you can see an interesting coincidence that at the same time as we were eating less butter, we were getting more obesity, just like, in fact, every single other country that I know of. And I don't think that's a coincidence. However, if you take a look at the right side of this diagram, you can see that maybe something, perhaps, is starting to happen. Sales of butter actually increased in 2008, and it's gone up even more since then. And the rate of obesity seems to have at least slowed down, while it's probably, perhaps, going up slowly still. I think absolutely it's going to be possible to reverse it. Because I believe that something big is about to happen in Sweden. And it's all, perhaps, because of a small, tiny, insignificant event back in 2005. Sort of like a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere else, leading to large consequences much later. And it all started with this woman, Dr. Annika Dahlqvist. She's a family physician like me. And she had struggled with her weight for most of her life, tried most diets you could think of without much long-term success, until back in 2005, when she went on the Atkins diet. And she lost her excess weight and felt great. So she read more about this, talked to other people, and then she started to give the same kind of advice to her patients, like obese people and diabetics, with excellent results. So she started a blog to spread these ideas, and it became quite popular, and she ended up in the papers and on the TV. Got a lot of attention. And not everybody was happy about this, of course, as you can imagine. And here's where it gets really interesting, because a couple of dietitians notified the highest medical authority in Sweden, the National Board of Health and Welfare, because they were afraid that Annika's patients were going to die from all that fat she was feeding them, you know. So what was the highest medical authority in Sweden going to do about this? They had different kinds of options. They could tell her to stop, they could issue a warning, and they could conceivably even take away her medical license. But they found out this wasn't really an easy question to answer. You had to get it right. So they launched an investigation to go through the science. And this took 2 years. Until in January of 2008, they reached their conclusion. And they said that it's okay, you're freed to go, you can keep doing this. Because, as they said, low-carb diets can today be seen as compatible with scientific evidence and best practice. Yeah. I think it's really unique, actually, that some other government agency has done this. But said that it's scientifically proven that it's working, this, for weight reduction. It's been shown in a number of studies, and they said that there is no evidence that they could find that this is harmful. So this was a revolution in the debate because low carb had been labeled a dangerous fad diet. You know, anybody's heard that before? But now the highest medical authority in Sweden said the opposite. They said that it's proven to work and there are no known dangers. And this sort of David versus Goliath story with the little doctor versus the establishment was great for the media. So this has ended up in all the papers and all the TV channels. And this really affected things moving on in Sweden. And there are different ways to document what's happened. But I find this interesting. This is the searches on Google for two different things. First, LCHF, the blue line, low carb, high fat. Second, Weight Watchers, which used to be the most popular way to lose weight in Sweden. So this is in 2007. You can see low carb, high fat, that's a flat line at the bottom. Basically nobody is searching for it. Whereas Weight Watchers is quite popular, especially in January, you know. For some reason, I don't know. But what happened in 2008? Interest in low carb, high fat took off and went straight up, and it continued into 2009 until we hit a bit of a backlash with some more resistance to this in the media. I think there's always resistance to new ideas, but we kept it up. There's a lot of books published about low carb, high fat in Sweden. This is a table at the bookstore where all the books are about LCHF. Kind of interesting, huh? And in 2010, something else interesting happened. We got our first Olympic gold eating low carb. So Jeff Volek, is he around somewhere? Maybe you should put this guy, this Swede, on your slide, I think. So he's doing biathlon, you know, skiing and shooting. So this went even higher, the interest in low carb, 2010 and 2011. So much so that a survey last year found that 23% of Swedes were trying to lower their carb intake instead of fat. And 5% said that they were following a strict low carb diet, such as, you know, Atkins, low carb, high fat. Well, this is what I showed you last year on the cruise. So the question is, what's happened since then? Anybody curious? Let's start with the red line. Actually, Weight Watchers, they launched a big campaign with TV commercials for their new online service this year. So it's been all over. And they got quite a few searches from that, as you can see. Now, low carb, high fat, there's been no commercials, nothing, you know. It's all free on the internet. And this is what happened. So it's just taking off, and you actually have to change the scale to see. It's going really well. So much so, actually, that we ran out of butter. An unexpected consequence, you might say. And this is supposed to be the last butter in Sweden, according to a talk show on TV. So they had these, this is 10 pounds of extra salted butter, and it's the last in Sweden. They put it out for auction on an online site. And went up to $750. So $75 a pound. Pretty good. Actually, this kind of eating has become popular in our neighboring countries too. It's spreading. So they had a bit of a butter shortage in Finland too this winter. And in Norway, it got really interesting because they're outside the European Union and they have different import rules. So they couldn't really import more butter. So when their butter ran out, it was gone. This is a newspaper advert from Norway this winter. If you buy, it says if you buy an Audi R8, that's sort of like a luxury car, it's $350,000 US. If you buy one of those, they will sweeten the deal by handing you a pound of butter for free. True. I don't know how many cars they sold though, but actually this made some headlines across the world, even ending up on the Colbert Report. So, large things have small beginnings, you know. Is it a fad? It's been labeled a fad, but I say it's not. Why? Well, that's simple. Because it works. That's what the highest medical authority in Sweden concluded, and that's what the science shows, as you heard from a lot of other speakers here. I think it's reasonable to ask if it's not low fat. That's been a fad all along. This old food pyramid and the new graphic redesign MyPlate, because it's all based on this old idea that fat in the diet raises the cholesterol in the blood and gives you heart disease. But does it? Well, it's not that simple, it seems. If you look at cholesterol, I mean, you know this, of course. The cholesterol can rise a bit on a low-carb diet, but it's mainly the good cholesterol that goes up. We know this now. And having a lot of good cholesterol, that's protective statistically from heart disease. So it's not that simple as we used to believe. And in fact, if you take a look at all the studies, several research groups have done this. Take a look at all the studies. You see no connection between saturated fat like butter and heart disease. So it doesn't work. It never did. And I'm going to show you something really interesting, something that blew my mind when I saw it. Maybe it's going to blow some of your minds too. The largest and best trial of a low-fat diet is the Women's Health Initiative. I think most of you have heard of it. They enrolled 50,000 women and randomized them to two groups. One group got the advice to eat a low-fat diet, and the other group to eat as they used to. And then they followed them for 8 years. And the official answer when it comes to the difference is that there was no difference. This happened back in 2006, and it's like perhaps the final nail in the low-fat coffin. But this is known. But the question is this the entire story? Was there no difference at all? Or did this study actually show something unexpected, something embarrassing, and something that the researchers didn't think could be true? Something that's so inconvenient that they preferred to hide it. You think? Where would you hide it in that case? These are the 17 pages of the report, the paper. And I think if you want to hide something, you can't really put it in the abstract, the first page, because that's the first thing that people read, right? And you can't put it in the back in the discussion conclusions, because a lot of people read that. So if you want to hide something, you would put it somewhere in the middle, you know, where people don't read. And that's what they did. So actually in the middle of a paragraph, in the middle of nowhere, they hid the only significant finding in this paper, which is that, okay, this is complicated stuff perhaps, might be meaning, but the hazard ratio for the people with cardiovascular disease at baseline was 1.26. What that means is that people who had heart disease going into this study, if they were told to eat a low-fat diet, they got sicker. They got more heart attacks, 26% more. And this is statistically significant. I think that's amazing. And if you don't believe that they tried to hide it, have a look at this. This is page 9 with a diagram of all the different subgroups. And it's hard to read from the back, but it's if you have hypertension, yes or no. You see the different results. And if you have diabetes, yes or no. Lots of different things, different age groups and so on. And if you take a look at the bottom, you see history of cardiovascular disease. No. But there is no yes. It's not there. But you can actually see it here. You know, these lines, it's there, the yes. And that's the only line that doesn't go over this center line, meaning it's the only statistically significant line. So this is wild. Actually, I was told this by a medical professor in Sweden, and he exchanged a few emails with the lead author of this study, and when he asked her about this, she never replied again. So anyway, the point about this is that, excuse me? Who funded the study? I don't know. I think it's the government. Yeah. Anyway, I don't think we should go all conspiracy theory about this. I think this is only a case of the researchers being embarrassed and confused and taking the easy way out. But the point to all this is that maybe low-fat diets are not only useless. Maybe they're actually dangerous for sensitive people. But they are useless. This is what a professor in Sweden said recently on the biggest in the biggest paper. 2 generations of Swedes have been given bad dietary advice and have avoided fat for no reason. It's time to rewrite the dietary guidelines and base them on modern science. Yeah, and the second and last example is another professor saying this. It's time to face the facts. There is no connection between saturated fats and cardiovascular disease. So we can eat all the butter we like. We don't have to be afraid of that. And also, this is a fad. So I think it's time for a paradigm shift. And you know, paradigm shifts, you know, shifts in worldview. Sort of like when back in the 16th century, people believed that we lived in the center of the universe, okay? And then they found out that, oops, the planet, the Earth seemed to be circling around the sun like all the other planets, and the center of the universe must be somewhere else. So that's a bit of a change in mindset, right? And the point is that it took decades, maybe 50, 60, 70 years before this change happened. People kept saying that the Earth is the center of the universe, even though some other people knew better. And the point is that these changes take time. But it's going on. And I think this is what's going to happen. We used to believe that saturated fat is bad. Now we're going to see that it's safe. We used to believe that carbs like bread and pasta were the best thing you can eat for your health. And now we're going to see that too much of it can make you fat and sick. And I think this is going on in Sweden. I mean, it started in 2008. I'm an optimist. I think in 2015, perhaps, we will have reached a tipping point, and big things are going to really start to happen. And I think this is going to happen in the US too. I think it's inevitable. And why? Because we have the science now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it quickly. Weight loss first, and then diabetes. So weight loss, well, you all know this, of course, but briefly, if you test this in the best trials that can be done, if you test low fat versus low carb for weight loss, low carb wins time after time after time. And this I find really interesting, because this group eating low fat, they're like in this study, they're told to restrict their calories, right? To count the calories and eat less. So it would be kind of impressive if you can eat an unlimited amount of low-carb food and lose the same amount of weight, right? But you don't only lose the same amount, you lose even more. So that's really impressive. And this has been shown over and over and over. Actually there are 17 of these studies comparing low carb and low fat for weight loss where they ended up with a significant difference between the groups. So they got a clear winner, okay? 17 times they found a clear winner. And the result is 17 to 0. And I find this a bit upsetting because when obese people come searching for help from the medical system, we're usually telling them to eat less and run more, right? So less fat often, I mean, that's how you get rid of calories most easily. And when people fail doing this, you'd hope that they would get this better advice. But usually that's not the case. Instead, we conclude that they are lazy, hopeless gluttons. And we advise them to let us cut away their stomachs to keep them from eating. So this is gastric bypass surgery, right? It's about to become one of the most common surgeries in the world. And I think we need a reality check because these are healthy organs that we are cutting away. So we're sort of trying to surgically adapt our bodies to the industrial food instead of adapting the food to our bodies. And some people are seeing this kind of surgery as the solution to the obesity epidemic, but it can't be. Because, yeah, for a simple reason. Removing healthy organs is not the cure to bad food. Okay? You'd think that people would at least first get the advice that has been shown 17 times over to work more effectively, to take away the sugar and the starch. Now this is a Norwegian friend of mine called Ronny Mattisen. Since this picture was taken, he's lost quite a lot of weight on a low-carb diet, and he did something interesting. He took a picture of himself in boxer shorts before and after, and then he put them in his computer and calculated how he looked between these pictures. So it became like a movie. You want to see? Yes. See, it's allowed us to do that. So it's going to start right away. So keep your eyes open. This is Ronny eating low-carb, high-fat food. Losing 70 pounds without hunger. And you can see it from the side as well. The fat melting away with no hunger. Pretty impressive, right? Not that it doesn't work that well, perhaps for everybody, but it works very well for most people. And interestingly, weight is just the beginning, because if you look at in these dieting trials, they often test different kinds of health factors too, and a lot of them improve, such as blood pressure, cholesterol profile, and perhaps most of all, blood sugar, diabetes. So, briefly, diabetes, that is too much sugar in your blood, right? Does everybody know where the sugar in the blood comes from? The food you eat, right? Almost all carbohydrates that turn into simple sugars in the gut. This is interesting because there's a huge epidemic of diabetes going on in the world. 30 million diabetics in the 80s is heading towards 500 million fairly soon. And even worse, the people who get diabetes, they are not expected to get well ever again. They're expected to get a little bit sicker every year, need more and more medication, and get complications, right? So what kind of diet advice do we give them as they get sicker and sicker? Well, perhaps we give them sick advice. So this is the old diet pyramid for diabetics. And I think this is sick advice because the base of the pyramid is starchy food, exactly the kind of food that turn to glucose in the gut and raise your blood sugar. Crazy. And the irony is that 100 years ago we knew better. This is a cookbook for diabetics from 1917. You can read it online if you like. It's called Diabetic Cookery, and you can Google for it, and you can read it. But I'm going to show you the most interesting pages, which is the pages telling diabetics what to eat and what not to eat. And let's see about what not to eat on the right. Number 1 is sugar. Number 2 is starchy foods, such as bread and pasta and rice. Actually, the heading of this page is foods strictly forbidden, which is now the base of the food pyramid. Crazy, right? Back then, diabetics were supposed to eat fat, such as butter and olive oil, meat, fish, eggs, which is about the same advice that I give to my patients today, getting excellent results for the people who can eat like that. So I'd like to show you a few studies on this. There are a few. I mean, Eric Westman did one of them, who's here today. I don't have time for that, but you can find them on my blog, dietdoctor.com. What I'm going to show you is that perhaps you don't even have to read a lot of studies. You could just prove this for yourself if you have a blood sugar meter. This is a meal I ate recently. It's a big piece of meat fried in butter. It's vegetables fried in butter, and it's homemade béarnaise sauce, which is melted butter and egg yolks. Okay, so it's a dietitian's nightmare. It's all saturated fat there, almost no carbohydrates, just a few grams from the vegetables. So what happens to my glucose if I eat this? Well, I tested it, and basically nothing happened. You know, really boring experiment. But perhaps we shouldn't be surprised, because if you don't eat any carbohydrates, you don't get any sugar going into your blood, and your blood sugar stays the same. Now, for a contrast to this, I went to the International Congress of Obesity, which is a giant conference for obesity researchers and doctors. Once every year, they go to one place in the world to discuss the latest when it comes to obesity research. And in 2010, they went to Sweden. So I went there, and I was served the worst lunch I've eaten in years. This is some of it. And if you don't believe me, you can read on the sign, International Congress of Obesity 2010, Stockholm, today's lunch. And this is the entire package. You know, this is sugar in the chocolate bar, sugar in the fruit in a more natural form, sugar in the yogurt, lots of added sugar in it, and it's all starch in the sandwich. Of course, some people might believe that there is some tasty low-carb stuff in it, but you'd be disappointed. It wasn't the case. It's like a homeopathic dose of tuna somewhere, hard to find. You have to go looking for it. Anyway, to compare it to this meal, something else happened. And I was a bit shocked, actually, because in an hour the blood sugar went up to 180, 179. And then, as you can see, it drops. And we've heard about this before at this cruise. You get hypoglycemia sometimes, and you get hungry, and you want to eat more. So, you'd think that if you're a diabetic, you should get this green line advice, right? To eat real low-carb food. But that's usually not the case. This is a brochure for diabetics in Sweden. It's called Food for Diabetics. And we can discuss the merits of a huge bowl of fruit. Perhaps it's not optimal for diabetics. But inside, it gets worse. It says that food that raises the blood sugar slowly is good, such as fruit and rice and pasta and potatoes and bread. Well, who gives out this advice that raise the blood sugar? It even says so, you know. And of course, it's a pharmaceutical company, as usual. And what do they sell? They sell insulin, yes. They sell drugs for lowering the blood sugar. So if people follow this advice, they will raise their blood sugar, they will need more medication, and the pharmaceutical companies is going to be able to print a lot of these brochures, you know, for the money, for the profits. So this is a huge problem, I think. We really have to change it. But how? Because there's a lot of resistance to this, lots of economic interests that kind of slow down change. So I think change will have to come from the bottom, right, from the grassroots. Viral change using media. And the best way perhaps to start this is via the internet and blogs. It's a great way to get information out there. So, and then we're going to end up in the papers, on the TV, of course. Just a few words about the message that I think can make this happen. I think we should really focus on the health aspects and not only on the weight. I think it's crucial that we focus on real food, not special processed low-carb products, right? Because this is a huge problem, I think, in Sweden and maybe even more so in America. It's called Dreamfields pasta. And you know, this is of course not the only problem, but it's a good example of it. They claim that this pasta made from wheat, all carbs, is just going to pass through your system and nothing is going to be absorbed. Is it true? Well, it wasn't true for me when I tested it. It wasn't true for Jimmy Moore when he tested it. And when some real researchers tested it and compared it to regular pasta for a group of volunteers, they couldn't find a difference. So I'd say this isn't carb facts, it's carb fiction. It's a low-carb fairy tale. And there are lots of these out there, such as bread made from wheat, and even Atkins cookies made from wheat flour and sugar alcohols and lots of other stuff like sweeteners and God knows what. I don't think that products like these are the solution. I think they are a big part of the problem. Keeping people from losing weight and keeping others from even taking low carbs seriously. So I think we absolutely have to focus on real food. And yeah, thank you. Also, I think it's helpful that this is good for people like us, you know, improving our health and weight, compared to the low-fat advice that today perhaps most benefits food companies, pharmaceutical companies, and so on. And finally, that this is based on new science proving that it works, compared to the old low-fat advice that didn't work in studies. Okay, so I think using that, I don't think we need to fear this resistance to change, because, like Victor Hugo said, all the forces in the world are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. And the time has come. Finally, this is Kenneth Jacobson. Kenneth, he got type 2 diabetes early in life, in his 40s, and he gained a lot of weight. He weighed over 250 pounds. He got heart disease. He got heart infarct after heart infarct until he had 7 of them. Needed coronary bypass surgery, new vessels to his heart. Needed 12 drugs every day just to control his risk factors. Well, the future was looking kind of dark until one day in 2009 when he went to the store to get food. And he met someone there who he had not talked to before. By the dairy counter, he started to talk to an unknown man about butter for some reason. And this man told Kenneth that he and his wife had been eating LCHF for a while and lost a lot of weight, felt great, and his wife had gotten rid of her diabetes. So Kenneth found this intriguing, of course. He got an address to the internet, went home to read the same night, and the very next day he started eating real food, except sugar and starch. Now, a little more than a year later, he doesn't weigh 250 pounds anymore. He's lost 70 pounds, down to 185, and he doesn't need 12 drugs a day. He's down to 1 drug. And when he went to the doctor recently to get a checkup, he had a perfect blood pressure without medication. He had a good cholesterol profile, and his blood sugar was normal, healthy, without medication, despite his diabetes diagnosis. So, perfect risk factors, feels a lot better, and has the energy to go for long trips on his motorbike again. Now, consider how this happened. It's one conversation with an unknown man. So this is the kind of change that you can inspire. And I think this is important because across the world, 100 million people or more could revolutionize their health by eating real food. The good news is that soon they will do that. I believe it because the evidence is here now. The paradigm shift is happening. And people like us can make it happen. So we can change the world. Thank you.